Any of us know what they want to do at 24 years old?
I know, it's fantastic. Actually, yes, I did. I knew what I was
I know
do.
you would, Fred.
Yeah, I'm
Wearing ascot.
yeah, wearing ascots and writing about bourbon. Yeah, I knew that.
Did you know Patreon saves lives? Well, maybe not, but it certainly saved this podcast from ending at one point. Show your support and join today. For nearly a decade, Eagle Rare Bourbon has been quietly donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to worthy causes through the Eagle Rare Life Award. Read the stories from this year's nominees and vote at eaglerarelife.com. Hurry, because voting ends on December 5th, 2018. Hey everyone, welcome back. And I just want to say thank you and welcome to two of our newest partnerships with Eagle Rare Life from Eagle Rare Bourbon, as well as Barrel Bourbon. I know a lot of people in the industry do listen to this show, so if you're looking for a non-traditional way to bring your brand in front of hundreds of thousands of listeners per year, go and check out our partnerships page at bourbonpursuit.com. This past week, I was actually able to go through our last recording sprint and sort of get our map of what the podcast release schedule is going to look like. And man, I feel a sigh of relief a little bit. We've got almost enough podcasts recorded that gets us almost to the end of May. You know, that's not including the roundtables, but we recorded a bunch. We've got things to come from the Higher Proof Expos. We've got more things like today's show to even go record coming up at the beginning of this year. And it's got a lot of good things that are coming. So if you're on Patreon, you can kind of see a little bit of a glimpse of what that looks like as well. This past week, there was a great article that came out by Wade Woodard that looked into the idea of, are you paying too much for barrel proof whiskey? It breaks down the math of things like Wild Turkey 101 versus Rare Breed, or Old Forester 86 versus Old Forester 1920. And you can see the significance in what the markup is that companies are charging for their regular offerings versus barrel proof for their higher proof equivalents. It's an interesting spreadsheet, especially for those math nerds out there, and you can get the link on our show notes. Now, today's Legend Series brings our good friends Wes and Kyle Henderson again onto the show, and as well as a new face with the youngest member of the clan to join the family ranks. We get to hear more of the stories about Angel's Envy, the people behind it, and a lot of the ideas that Lincoln Henderson, Wes's father, Kyle's grandfather, really influenced on bringing this journey to where it is today. Now, this is part of the Kentucky Derby Museum's Legend Series, and the next season of those Legend Series are going on sale. So if you want to listen to topics like today, but we're going to be talking about Andrea and Pam from Michter's. We've got Craft Night featuring Rabbit Hole, Jephthah Creed, and the Peerless Founders. We've also got Dixon Deadman of Kentucky Owl, and the first one begins in January, so buy your tickets at derbymuseum.org/Legend Series. Now, I know this goes out to a lot of people, and I want to say thank you to everybody that is continually pushing out and writing those reviews. I keep getting them, and not only that, as I do read every single one of them, and thank you for all of the constructive criticism. I'm always going to do better to worry about our presence and making sure that we are delivering the best content and the best listening experience for you as well. So go ahead, make sure you leave a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube or wherever you can, and just make sure you give us a thumbs up wherever it is. And now with that, enjoy this week's episode. But first, here's a quick word from Barrel Bourbon and Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
Hi, this is Joe Beatrice from Barrel Bourbon. Every batch we produce has a distinct flavor profile. We take pride in blending and preserving spirits for the people who enjoy them the most. You. Find out more at barrelbourbon.com.
This past week, Sears announced it will be filing for bankruptcy. That's sad. Sears connected many of us to our childhood. So did Toys R Us. It's gone too. The only real iconic retailers we have left are Walmart and Target, with both trying to fend off Amazon to your bank account. And they couldn't be more different. Walmart has the stained shirt and sweatpants guy and a whole lot of deal seekers, while Target's base is designer-centric and female-forward. They've both found their audiences, while many struggling retailers have yet to find their spot. One area they're all trying to capture is bourbon. In fact, you will find bourbon in Walmart, Meijer, Target, and many other general retailers. You see, bourbon offers marketers one of the most dynamic consumer bases in the country. We're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, all forms of religions, and a whole lot in between. The taste for bourbon knows no political affiliation or cultural heritage. And so, big money people are trying to tap into us as if we're the next great consumer base. Hey, I dig it. I just wish Sears thought of it too. Bourbon could have been its savior, holding pappy raffles amidst the Craftsman tools, dishwashers, and Michelin tires. Bean Suntory's Fred No could have had private tastings next to pots and pans, while Jimmy Russell's held court in the fishing and tackle area. Alas, that didn't happen. But it could have. In fact, I believe bourbon's retail reach is endless, and that's not necessarily good. For every big retailer that gets Pikesville Rye, that's one less bottle going to a local independent store, the likes of which Sears put out of business in the 1960s with their Sears catalog. Perhaps it's the cycle of life in retail, but the story of Sears is a reminder that progress can take victims along the way. Let's hope we don't see this in our beloved bourbon independent liquor stores. And that's this week's Above the Char. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Fred Minnick. Until next week, cheers.
Let me turn it over to the museum's official bourbon authority, Mr. Fred Minnick.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much. Thank you. Folks, I can't reiterate how important it is for Commonwealth Bank and Trust to come in on this. This is the first year we've ever had a title sponsor for this series. This is our 5th year doing the Legends series. So once again, thank you so much, Commonwealth Bank and Trust. Thank you. So this is our 5th year. It's pretty amazing when you think about it, because now it seems like every other weekend, master distillers are doing a special tasting at a bar, or there's an event just in some random city from Dayton to Pittsburgh. But in 2013, when we started this out, it was really we didn't know how it would take off. I mean, yes, the bourbon industry was booming and people were coming down for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and they were standing in long lines for the special releases like the Angel's Envy Cask Strength, which won the World's Best Spirit by Paul Packel around that time. And we were wondering, would it take off? Would it work? And here we are 5 years later. It has. And it has because of you all. How many of you all have been here before? Look at how many repeat people are here. Thank you all so much. It's because of you and your support for the museum and bourbon that I'm able to sit up here, and talk about bourbon with such great people. And in years past, we've had one individual up here. We've had a single legend. It's been we've called it the Legend Series. But this year, it's all about family. Tonight, we have the Hendersons. The next session, we'll have the Noes. And after that, we'll have Willett, the Coles Fiends. And the Henderson family is very unique. I have Kyle, I have Wes, I have Andrew. And Kyle's grandfather, Andrew's grandfather, and Wes's father, Lincoln Henderson, was the founding master distiller for a little brand called Woodford Reserve. He was also highly influential on a little brand that sold a few cases called Jack Daniels once upon a time. Anyone ever heard of those two brands? Pretty important stuff. And this family is synonymous with bourbon lore, and a lot of it stems upon Lincoln. But it's really been, he created Angel's Envy with his son and his grandson, and he told me that was the greatest moment of his career. Think about that for a moment. A man who created a bourbon from nothing in Woodford Reserve and turned it into one of the world's most prestigious bourbons, and helped bring Jack Daniels into the limelight from a premium perspective. He says that the greatest moment of his career is spending time with his son and his grandson. And that's really what bourbon is all about. It's about family. And Wes, you have a very, very large family. 6 kids?
That we know of, yes.
6 kids that you know of.
And my wife, yeah, it's 6, right, honey? You would know. You would know we had 6, right? Okay, good, very good. I say that to Julie, and Julie's like, yeah, I know how many I had.
So do you have a favorite child?
It changes. There's a certain amount of jockeying that goes on in the will at home, and depending on who's nice to me this day, they may move up or may move down.
All right, well, just up here on the stage, who's your favorite, Kyle
these
or
two
Andrew?
right here.
Yeah.
These two.
All right, well, I got some tips beforehand. What's Andrew's birthday?
April 3rd.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. What's Kyle's birthday?
May 24th.
Nope.
3rd.
Wrong way.
Which one?
To be fair, the 24th is your other son's birthday.
Right, that's
Yeah.
right.
And your dad.
Look, I know their names, all right?
26th.
I know.
26th.
I'm kidding. 26. And I didn't remember, so that's okay.
So I have a few more. I have a few more Wes in particular kind of questions. Now, I was on my way in, and a police officer stopped me because he told me. He said, "I heard you're interviewing Wes Henderson tonight," and I said, "Yes, sir." I was a little worried that you might have a warrant out for you or something like that. But he brings up something from your fraternity days in college. Apparently, you stole a pickle. You stole a pickle or something like that. They still have a warrant out for whoever stole that pickle. Can you tell us about that story?
Some of you might remember this back in 1984 or so, Paramount. How did you find this out?
Listen, I'm an avid researcher.
Paramount Pickles had a giant pickle on a billboard. Do y'all remember that? On I-65? Well, one night after some exploits, the pickle disappeared. And some people that I will not name were responsible for that pickle disappearing. And we had the pickle, and we found out the next morning, though, that they were offering like a $10,000 reward for said pickle. So we immediately got rid of that pickle and returned it to the rightful owners. But that was my brush there, and yeah. So the pickle went back on the billboard. All is good. Nobody got hurt. Nobody went to jail. We probably should have, but that... No, that's what we should have done. We should have claimed the reward, but we were too scared. You know, you bring a pickle to a fraternity house, you have it downstairs for a party. There's probably a likelihood a lot of people know about that pickle, and somebody's going to drop dime at some point in time. So it just get rid of the pickle, the hot pickle. That's what we called it. Thanks, Fred.
You're very much welcome. I want to turn it for a moment for a little bit more serious subject, and that's your father, Lincoln. Just inaugural Bourbon Hall of Famer, very important to the history of bourbon. Had one of the great golden palates, and just revered by anybody who met him. What was it like growing up with your father?
Dad, if anything, was very humble, and growing up, look, my dad was a scientist, really. That's what he was at heart. And, you know, the bourbon was just an aspect of his science. You know, he could have been a scientist doing anything. And bourbon was just, you know, the result or a tool or whatever you want to call it. So, you know, I was more interested in the geeky science stuff. You know, my dad would bring home microscopes from the lab, and, you know, I would stick my parents' fingers for blood so I could look at their blood under the microscope, and silly little things like that. But they fostered that. You know, I'd go to work with my dad. I'd go to the lab and get to hang out there. So, you know, it wasn't necessarily fostering an interest in bourbon as opposed to just fostering interest in science in general. But it wasn't until I got a lot older that I started to understand and appreciate how important what he was doing was to the history of bourbon. And that's really eventually what ended up leading to Angel's Envy was and truthfully, Fred, I ran away from what my dad did because I did not want to do what he did because I didn't want to appear to have gotten there because of my father. So in looking back now, I wish I would have wised up sooner.
It wasn't one of those things where, like, I remember, you know, being at that age and like, I don't want to do what my dad does because I'm cooler, I'm better. It wasn't one of those?
No, I mean, at the time, being a master distiller wasn't cool. You know, I mean, nobody knew who the master distiller was. Nobody really cared. I don't think it was that. I think it's just that I always had a thing where I didn't want to get somewhere because my dad was there, and people would think I got there because of my dad, not because of my hard work to get there.
Okay. When you were growing up, did he bring bourbon home into the home and talk about bourbon? Was it a part of the household?
No, not really. Once again, and I think it's the same way with my boys. You know, we have so many samples and so many distilled spirits around the house. Certainly, as a responsible parent, you have to educate your kids, but it's just something that's there all the time. Now, my dad, I'd always find a stash of new make under the bathroom cabinet, you know. And what Dad did is he used that for aftershave in the morning. So he would get lab samples from work, and they were in little glass bottles and at 100 and whatever proof. And that's what he would slap on his face for aftershave in the morning. So Dad would reek of booze, you know, at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Is that what you drank as a teenager?
No, I didn't really. I tell you what, I never, as a teenager, that was really not part of, you know. Now, when I went to school, things changed a little bit, but I think it's because it's there all the time. It's part of your life all the time. It's more of a commodity as opposed to something that be anything different than that. And you know, even in school, as I became of drinking age, I drank some nasty stuff when I had access to some really good stuff, you know, which didn't make a lot of sense either looking back. So
There was something nasty you drank.
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to name any names.
All right. I mean, did someone like in your fraternity make it themselves?
No, I mean, although I would distill, I did this when I was little though. I had little test tubes in my closet, and I would ferment things in those test tubes.
How old were you?
Probably 10.
You were fermenting things in your closet at the age of 10
But
years
it
old.
wasn't to drink. It was just it wasn't to experience the effects of alcohol.
Andrew was doing that at 15.
That's true. We'll get to that. That
was
stuff was
terrible.
nasty. So I guess
Okay.
now that I think about it, I'm glad we talked about this. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. That was probably my first fermentation experience, other than going with Dad to work.
Okay, so you were fermenting at 10 years old. That's great. Andrew, since it was brought up, what was going on in your closet when you were you making moonshine or what's
I
going
had this
on?
wonderful idea to try to make some wine,
Okay.
but at the time I didn't know that baking yeast and brewing or distilling yeast was vastly different and created vastly different things. Tried to use a little baking yeast, let it just sit in the garage for 2 or 3 months, and
Oh, nice.
You tried to make strawberry wine too.
yeah, it was strawberry. I tried to boil the strawberries myself and everything, and yeah,
Okay.
it was not good at all.
Well, in your defense, it's probably better than toilet wine.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah. Oh. So you've had toilet wine. It's no. It was bad.
Yeah,
That's a prisoner joke there.
Slightly toxic, maybe. Nobody else in my family would drink it.
No. So Kyle, you tasted it?
It was really bad.
Okay. Did you ever make any fermentations when you were younger?
Not on purpose, no. Not that I'm aware of, no. Never did.
So Andrew, I want to talk about your grandfather with you. Like you're 22, 23,
24.
24?
I think. Am I 20? Yeah.
Don't
23.
ask me.
23.
Yeah. So you got to spend some time with your grandfather. What was that like? You weren't in the business yet, but what was it like? What was it like spending time with Lincoln?
I mean, kind of like my dad said, when I was growing up, he was a master distiller. Everybody thought that was cool. I didn't really appreciate that it was cool. To me, he was just my grandfather, funny, crazy guy who drank a lot. So,
Funny, crazy guy who drank a lot.
yeah.
But
For work.
For work, yes, for work purposes.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a lot of fun. Like, unfortunately, I wasn't able to learn distilling from him. Fortunately, I've been able to learn it from Kyle, who got to learn it from him. But, yeah, I mean, to me, he was just my grandfather. He might have been a celebrity in his own right, but
Definitely was.
wasn't special at that, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Is Kyle a good teacher?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
I mess up a lot. I don't know if that's his fault or my fault, but
If he tells you it's your fault, then it's your fault. That's the rule of the teacher.
Yeah.
Is that right? So Kyle, you got to spend a lot of time with your grandfather, and you went to U of L into the chemistry program, and largely because of your grandfather, correct? What was it like spending time with him?
This is a little different. So I never got to experience him in a real work environment. It was always while being a work environment, but it was always with my dad or with him in the plant, blending, tasting barrels, almost kind of just, shooting the breeze. He always had a quick joke, a good quip. Didn't take a whole lot very seriously. Always, make mistakes. You put the hose on backwards, or you dump a barrel into the wrong place, or you forget to close the valve before you dump it, and he looks at you like you're the dumbest person on the planet, and he just smiles at you and goes, "You'll figure it out." But it was really nice. He was very patient. The industry is very close-knit.
Yeah.
And you could tell that he had been doing it for a long time, and he had a tremendous amount of respect from a lot of people in the industry. Because everywhere you went, people knew him, knew of him, and for those that didn't know him, he talked to you and treated you like you were his best friend for that 60 seconds he spent, and really focused on you. It felt like you were the only person in the room, whether you were at an event with him, or it was me with him, or any of us. It's just a unique experience. I thought about this. I think you guys saw the other day. I was at work on Saturday, and I was thinking, man, I wish he was here. I had some questions, and it's just the three of us, and there's people we can reach out to, but it's just not the same.
You miss him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What are the moments you miss him the most?
When something goes wrong or something unexpected happens in the plant, and we're going, who with 50 years of experience could we call? Oh, nobody. There was times when he was around, we'd have a problem. When we first launched the brand, we questions about filtration, and picked up the phone, and we explained what was happening. He goes, oh, well, it's XYZ, and you need to do this and do that and buy that piece of equipment. It would have taken us 2 years to figure that out, and for him, he had done it forever. He knew exactly what he was looking for. So,
Dan would have been at home in that distillery. That would have been his playground. I built a brand not honestly on my own, but I can build a brand. I can run a business. I can, do all the things to bring Angel's Envy to market. But having Dad there now, like Kyle says, it's those are the times you think, well, I wish Dad was here. But when something goes sideways. And every time I walk up to that distillery, I get the same feeling that, that first of all, I feel a presence of Dad there every time we're there. But wow, now is the time when Dad, we really could have used you right now, when the fermentation goes crazy or something goes weird. But Dad was a very quiet presence. He's very steadying, very quiet presence. He lets you learn. And at your, and he'd let us make mistakes, which was great, because that's the only way you can get to where you need to be, is if you make those mistakes. So once again, he had this quiet presence. He never met a stranger, and I've never heard anybody say anything negative about my father, ever.
So there was a craft distiller I met once, and he said that Lincoln offered to taste his samples for nothing. Now people charge 10 grand to do something like that. And he would just send him samples to taste, and he's like, your fermentation's off, you need to decrease it by a day. And he would fix it, and they would taste better. And that's the stuff that your dad did. It's like he was very much someone who would mentor anyone who would listen. And I personally wish I had more time to spend with him. And it was a sad day for the entire business when we lost him. But, you all lost a family member. And even though it's been five years, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because we all miss him. So,
Fred, that defines, though, the industry, that type of, Dad's willingness to work. And we do the same things, on a regular basis. We're always sharing knowledge. We're always, working with brands that may be wanting to come to market and need advice on things, this and that and the other. But that is really the essence of the bourbon. And not just, I don't think it's the entire spirits industry. I would say the bourbon industry in particular is that type of those relationships, that willingness to share experiences and, share victories and, all this and that and the other. But that's what makes it fun for me. One of the things that makes it fun for me are those relationships. And that's what I think makes bourbon a special spirit. It's got life beyond a product that's just something in a bottle. It's something that transcends a mere commodity.
A lot of generations that go into it.
Absolutely.
And typically those generations would have made something from at least 51% corn and distilled it and put it into a new charred oak barrel, but not these guys, not the Hendersons. They decided to take another step. And we're going to taste that step, and then after, we're going to talk about why you all decided to, as a family, the decision for putting it into a port barrel. But first, let's have a taste. Let's go to the
On the left.
far left. Might be a little stuck here, so be careful. One note on what you're tasting. On the end, it says you have the Angel's Envy Cask Strength 2015. You actually have the 2014, which is a bottle that's twice as valuable as the 2015. So you actually have an extremely rare taste tonight in the 2014 Cask Strength. And we will be auctioning off this year's bottle of Cask Strength later for the museum. Again, this is a nonprofit, so every little bit helps. So tell us, as we taste what I've always said was the most controversial bourbon when it was launched. Why did you all do the go in port barrels and go through that process with me? What were y'all, the meetings beforehand, what were y'all talking about, and why port barrels?
It wasn't a long walk to get there. When the way things went, when I decided I wanted to do this project, I went to Dad and I said, Dad had been retired from Brown Forman for a few years, and I said, Dad, look, I want to do this as a family. Are you interested? And he said, sure. So at that point in time, because you say, okay, we're going to the bourbon business. Well, it's not that easy, we got to get there some way or another. But the challenge to Dad was, and what I wanted Dad to do, if you're going to come out of retirement, Dad, I want to look at doing something that's unique or something that maybe you played around with at Brown Forman that for whatever reason did not make it out or didn't work or didn't get perfected or the market wasn't ready for it. So we kept coming back to secondary barrel finishes. A lot of scotches do it. A lot of single malts, they'll finish in secondary barrels, port barrels, sherry barrels. But it had never really been done successfully with American whiskey. So as we talked about different crazy ass ideas to do, we kept coming back to that particular crazy ass idea at the time. So that's what we settled on, Fred. We thought that was a differentiator. We thought it would be cool to do something that nobody had really done with American whiskeys.
Now, people had done it before. For example, Booker Noe had done it in the late 90s, but no one had ever said, we're going to do that as a mainstay product. That's going to be they'd always been like experimentations.
Right, and experimentations and really weren't really hugely commercially successful at the time, but it was timing. Timing's everything in this business. So taking those same brands now and bringing them back, will be a different story. Like the masterpiece, the Beam masterpiece, and so on and so forth. So, but I think we're the first people to ever, like Fred said, make it a mainstay and make it something that was very controversial at the beginning because of the classification, and something that people really don't ask twice about now because it's become a very common thing.
Well, there's still people who bring it up.
Well, people like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a never-ending discussion. Is this really bourbon?
Well,
So let me just, we have, for the new folks we have in here, to be bourbon, it has to come from a fermented mash of at least 51% corn, come off the still at no higher than 160 proof, go into a new charred oak container, AKA barrel, at no higher than 125 proof and bottled at 80 proof. Nowhere in the basic definition does it say, can you put it into a used barrel? And that these guys, they didn't find a loophole, But if you look at the bottle, it says straight bourbon finished in port barrels. And now you have a new classification you can use. But so I know you've talked this, you've given this bill a lot. I think I want Kyle to give this bill because Kyle gives a really good answer as to why this is still bourbon. And you just tell us, why is Angel's Envy still bourbon?
Because you can't unbourbon a bourbon. That's a simple way of putting it. Once it's a bourbon, it's still a bourbon no matter what you do to it. So in our case, as long as it don't lie to you and tell you we put it into a port barrel, as long as we tell you it went into a port barrel, it's just a bourbon finished in a port wine barrel.
I think you have to be very clear. Angel's Envy is not a bourbon. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in port wine barrels.
Yeah.
That's the entire statement of contents. So, for example, when you see advertising from Angel's Envy, it will just not say Angel's Envy bourbon. It will say Angel's Envy bourbon finished in port wine barrels. That's the truthful designation. And there have been, that people try to bend that a little bit, And there are some finished products that have been classified as bourbons, So even the federal government sometimes doesn't know what the hell they're thinking about, No
Wait, are you saying that our federal government doesn't know what they're doing?
No offense to my dear friend, Congressman Yarmouth here, thank you. He may agree with that sometimes as well. But, and we're, by the way, before I forget, we're thankful that he joined us. Talk about a big supporter of our industry and a major cheerleader.
Hey, he runs the Bourbon Caucus. Congressman
right.
Yarmouth, everybody, runs the Bourbon Caucus. Thank you.
So, that's, look, spirits are very complicated, and I can understand how sometimes there's a divergence. But now, it used to be at the very beginning, we'd have a lot of people really raise that flag as something, and I say the purists or whatever. That's probably not a fair thing to say, but once
Don't
again,
hate on us. Don't hate on us.
No, I'm not. I think it's bourbon and better.
So you know how this problem gets fixed? It is you add a new level of bourbon. That's all you got to do. And I understand that there's a frustration of for people who put it in new casks, but think about it from a consumer perspective. Not everyone follows a tight line of a flavor like you do. Some people will fill that barrel up with a quarter amount of port, or maybe it's an eighth amount of port. But is that flavoring? Doesn't that change the profile? And then how can it considered to be a Kentucky straight bourbon if it's finished in a port barrel that has a quarter amount of port in it? Right. So not everyone is being as religious to what you're doing as you. So when you get pushback on this, I hope that you are not taking it personal and just realizing that people really just do love bourbon and are trying to protect the sanctity of it.
Well, there are two things here. There's the legal regulatory definition of bourbon, okay? And you also have truth in consumerism and things like that. So what you're talking about where you're not only, you may be legally correct in what you're doing, but if you're doing something that is misleading to consumers or in a way that is not an accurate representation of what you say you're doing, that's where you start crossing that line a little bit. And in the industry, we've seen a little bit of that here and there. And
you guys, I see you all as leaders in this category. You're the largest product of this category, and you all do a nice job, and you kind of set the bar. But if you wanted to press the federal government to add a special type of whiskey like they did in the late 1960s for light whiskey.
Yeah, that was a big success.
Light whiskey was that was awful.
We could talk about that for an hour, folks,
yeah.
all right?
Yeah, that's a different thing. But, that's what's missing here, is that you fall through the cracks of what's allowed as bourbon, and I think that's probably what could be fixed. Would you like to see a special designation for barrel finishes, or do you like where it's at?
I don't have a problem with where we are.
Okay.
As long as we don't see people going way off the reservation and doing stuff that may stretch that line we just talked about. You usually only put regulation in place I don't think regulation is in a lot of places fosters ingenuity and creativity and innovation. It's a way to kind of preserve the status quo and keep people from polluting that particular area. So as far as regulations go, I don't think we need it right now, but.
Andrew, do you agree with your dad?
Yeah, someone's going to ruin it for everybody. That's how it's going to happen. People are going to start diverting, try to get away with more and more, and
That's how it happens usually, right? Right. I mean, that's how you end up with things, is that people don't necessarily do the right things.
Yeah.
But we're playing around with all kinds of different barrel finishes, mash bill. Both Andrew and Kyle are working on different innovations. So I intend to keep pushing the envelope. I intend to be as creative as we can. But we can talk about this later if you want to. But at the same time, we have to honor the history of bourbon. We're blessed to be able to do what we do. Blessed to have a family, generations that have done this for a while. But with that responsibility, you're able to do some cool things, but you can't forget that responsibility you have to honor the history and heritage of bourbon.
So take us through the actual process, Kyle, of putting it into a port barrel, because you all have a very scientific and you have a system. Take us through that. A lot of people have not seen that. What's it like?
Sure. So we start very similar to other bourbon whiskey products. We've got the 51% corn. It's actually 72% corn. It's aged in a new charred barrel. Goes into the barrel at 125. That's aged for at least 4 years. So 4 to 7 years old for our product. And what Andrew and myself and one of our other members of our blend team in the plant will do is we will find about 8 to 15 barrels of various ages. So we'll pull some 4-year-old, we'll pull some 5-year-old, we'll pull some 6-year-old, and we'll blend those barrels together in a tank. And we'll start with 10 barrels and we'll add a few barrels here and a few barrels there until we get a nice whiskey in its own right. And we'll take that whiskey at barrel proof and we put that into a port wine barrel.
Is it dry? Is it just a little wet? What's it like?
Depends. So we have a couple different things. So for every, let's say, 20 bourbon barrels we dump, we'll fill about 12 to 15 port barrels with that. And we'll fill about 2 to 3 of those port barrels will always be a first use port barrel. So we get port barrels in a couple times a year from Portugal. And those will be, depending on what time of the year we get them, maybe still a little moist or a little more dried. That those barrels get shipped with a little bit of residual port in them. But by the time they're dumped in Portugal, they get through Portuguese customs, they get on a boat, they get shipped here, they get through U.S. customs, they arrive to us, we unload them, we fill them up. It may be 3 or 4 months. So those barrels have dried a little bit. That port, is a little bit of tacky residue left in the barrel, but for the most part, it's dry. So we'll put the whiskey in there, and those first use port barrels are a very integral part of our finishing process because those are going to imbue the most port nuances to the whiskey. What kind of helps us balance our flavor profile is we reuse those barrels. So after the first use, there's not as much port influence left. So we'll fill those back up, and the whiskey coming out of that barrel will get blended with the first use and a second use and a third and a fourth and a fifth use port barrel, so we can balance that port influence, because sometimes those first use port barrels are way too much port. You don't want to do those by yourself unless you're doing something special or they taste or are defined as something different. So we want to blend those first use port barrels. We'll blend some second use, some third use to get a balanced profile to get what you guys have in your glass today.
Could you all taste a little bit of the port in the glass? Could you taste that first taste? I always get like a nice little hint of chocolate, which is a very common note in port.
It's a nice aroma, and it sits on your finish. We didn't want to create a whiskey that tasted like it was mixed with port wine, because that's not what we're doing, and we wanted to make sure that's very clear. It's just it's a finish. It's an added nuance to the whiskey.
So as consumers, like you all are distilling now.
Yes.
Prior to this, you guys were purchasing stocks from other distilleries to do this with. Now, if we wanted to purchase the bourbon that you all were using for before you put it in a port barrel, to compare it to, what bourbon would we buy to have that comparison?
This episode of Bourbon Pursuit is made possible through listeners like you, supported through Patreon. and with partnerships brought to you by the following. Eagle Rare Bourbon has certainly won its share of honors and awards, so now they're giving back and recognizing those who share the same passion for excellence. Like last year's Eagle Rare Life winner, Jake Clark. He's a veteran who served in the Army, Secret Service, LAPD, FBI, and the National Guard. Jake now runs a nonprofit. It's called Save a Warrior. It's dedicated to helping active duty military, veterans, first responders survive the devastating effects of post-traumatic stress. The nominees that earn the most votes will be presented to an award-winning panel of judges who will then select the grand prize winner and 6 $5,000 category prize winners. Voting ends December 5th, so head over to eaglerarelife.com and vote now. Versatility. It's what's been missing in the glass space. We've got rocks, Glencairns, Copitas, brandy snifters, and more to accommodate a wide range of drinks and the way we enjoy it, with or without ice. It took a Kickstarter campaign to change things up, and this is where the Duo glass from Aged in Ore comes in. It's a 10-ounce double-wall glass that eliminates the need for coasters. It's tulip-shaped that allows your sense of smell to pick up a wide array of flavors. And it has 1-ounce indicators, so no need for more glassware when making cocktails or pouring just the right amount of your favorite bourbon. It's also ice ball ready that comes with its own 2-inch ice mold that snugly fits into the glass for a slow melting experience. For a limited time, Bourbon Pursuit listeners get 15% off orders and standard free shipping at agedandore.com using the code PURSUIT. So go over to agedandore.com, that's aged and ore.com, and get your Duo glasses today.
Prior to this, you guys were purchasing stocks from other distilleries to do this with. Now, if we wanted to purchase the bourbon that you all were using for before you put it in a port barrel, to compare it to, what bourbon would we buy to have that comparison?
We talked about this today.
Yeah. It's a new way of asking.
That is a good way.
That's a trick question.
Yeah. No, basically, you're not allowed to disclose where you get the bulk whiskey from.
Let me kind of clarify that. So when we started Angel's Envy, we didn't have our distillery yet.
Yep.
So fortunately, with our connections in the industry, we were able to get people to produce whiskey or find whiskey produced to our specifications, which we purchased. We aged most of it. We did the port barrel finishing. We did the blending. We did everything related to that product except for the initial distillation. Now with our new distillery, we're doing that as well. So what Fred's trying to sneakily do, by the way,
which I've done it how many times
in a
now?
million, it's like it being a deputy. Are there any lawyers here? Steve, how many times in different ways can you ask a question in a deposition to get to the answer you want to get? There you go. That's what I'm talking about. So anyway, so we don't talk about the producers. We have non-disclosures, and it just makes it, look, bourbon's all about stories, right? Lies and war stories is what I like to say. And but I tell you what's remarkable, Fred, you'll probably appreciate this, that we are able to manage inventory or manage products that's produced from other producers and every time create a consistent taste profile. So that talks about the importance of blending and the artistry of blending. People don't talk about that. People talk about the distillers all day long. The blending, which is what Andrew and Kyle do better than I could ever imagine doing, is the most integral part of what we do.
Does that make you proud as a father to see that?
Very much so.
It's awesome.
Very much so. And they've really, I've been out, I'm on the road about 60% of the time. So, you know.
What's your title? The chief?
I don't know.
Entertainment
bottle washer
officer?
or whatever. I'll do whatever needs to be done at the plant.
And he's still a fireman, everybody. He's still how many hours a week do you work as a fireman?
I just work when the pager goes off. If there's a run, if I'm in town, I'll make the run. So, you know, it just managed to work in. You know, my family is so patient, and I think we all appreciate how hard we had to work to create Angel's Envy. We appreciate how hard we have to work to maintain it. We also appreciate the importance of doing things beyond work, volunteerism, philanthropy, things like that. So, you know, you have to make time to do things like that.
Yeah. Well,
by the way, Andrew's a firefighter as well. He's a state certified firefighter.
Are you really?
And EMT.
Yep.
Thank you for your service. So if anyone's choking tonight, we have two people up here.
We're off duty.
Who can help you out.
No heart attacks tonight, nothing like that. Been there, done that. We love
Seriously,
you. Stay healthy.
None of that business. I don't want that. Let's move on to, let's taste the rye, but I'm gonna keep the conversation going.
So Kyle talked about subtlety. All right?
This is not.
Subtlety in finishing. So the port barrel finish is very subtle. There's nothing subtle about the rum finish for this rye, which you're going to taste right now. On the nose, it's very rich. You get molasses. This is a rum barrel, by the way. So this is a rye whiskey finished in a rum barrel for up to 18 months. So on the nose, you get molasses. You get all kinds of stuff going on. When you taste it, you'll taste that influence of the rum finish as well as the spiciness from the rye, and it kind of dances back and forth between the two. It's 100 proof, which you probably would not have known if I didn't tell you. It's very smooth for 100 proof. So, and my dad and I, we can talk about this whenever if you want to, Fred, had very strong opposing opinions about this when I created it.
Very.
What do you think of the rye? It's just different, right? Yeah, it's very different.
This is like, one of the things about rye is like rye has a little bit more of a kind of an experimentation allowance in the taste profile than I think bourbon does. Like you can do more with rye in other barrels. Like I've tasted a sherry finished bourbon that's just awful. I've never had a bad sherry finished rye.
I
Kyle,
think
what's that?
You haven't drank the right sherry finished bourbon yet.
Well, no, I've had it. I've had all of them. I mean, I'm the reviewer.
No, I'm saying you haven't. But my point is, I don't think anything's come to market yet that really hits the mark.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
If you taste the sherry finish I've got in my plant right now, it'll change your life.
Well, that's what I was going to Kyle and Andrew on this as blenders. What is it about rye that maybe makes it a little bit more flexible to blend, or am I wrong in this?
So rye typically is pretty one-dimensional. For most consumers, it's just spice.
Yeah.
Heavy spice.
Yep.
And that's why the rum barrel we felt paired really nicely with this, because you can bring in that sweetness to kind of counterbalance that. Bourbon, you get a lot. You get fruits and woodiness and some spices and some florals and different things. And bourbon typically is, kind of very nice on its own. And at least in our experience, the rye is, while it's good, graininess, some spiciness, maybe a little bit of floral, and that's about it, typically.
Yeah.
So rye kind of leaves a gap that you can fill with different things, whether it's a sherry finish or a rum finish or Madeira or whatever you're doing.
It's easier to mix a spicy with a sweet than a sweet with a sweet.
And that Andrew nailed it. I get compliments on the rye all the time. Oh, Wes, that's genius, blah, 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 blah. It's really not genius, folks. It's real simple. Rye is spicy. The rum finish is sweet. It works. It's not that genius. Now the artistry comes in, though, is to be able to make it work in a way to where you can pick out all those different things. When you've got something this complex and these many flavors, it's easy to get something that's a jumbled mess and you can't pull anything out of it. So the art here was to try to get it in a way that danced back and forth between the sweet and the spicy and got something that wasn't a jumbled mess. And I think we managed to get there with that.
So we talked about rum. You guys are now owned by Bacardi. But when the purchase came out that Bacardi acquired you, it became known that they were a minority investor. When did they come in as a minority investor to Angel's Envy?
They came in pretty early. Our initial partners were friends with Facundo Bacardi. And, it just, they thought they didn't have a bourbon. They thought it might be cool to be part of the brand, so they had a very small stake in the company, a seat on the board, a non-voting seat on the board. So for us, it was more of an advisory thing. Fortunately, Bacardi was smart enough to leave us the hell alone, okay? And they let us run the brand and let us, because they've never made bourbon before. They get it. Now, they made some amazing rums. So on the technical side, geniuses. They're great. But so they let us build the brand. We were able to work together closely. And then when the time came to where we thought about bringing on a partner or selling the brand, they were the first logical place for us to start. They're a family company. They understand the value of keeping values, keeping culture, and they promised to really let us do what we know we can do.
So I am friends with a lot of people who are investors in town, and everybody was like kicking themselves for not investing with you, a few years ago. What was that time like when you were needing capital and you were trying to raise funds and trying to get people to believe in the project?
On the business side, I think we were really smart. I mean, we were fortunate to have some. If anything, I'm smart enough to put really smart people around me. Okay, and our partnership, we were able to bring the brand to market really for about $400,000. Bring it to market, something in a bottle. So we did not bring any investors until after we already had a brand on the shelves. So, and for those of you, once again, that are in business or raise money, that's the best possible way to do it because you get a good valuation. You've already got a brand that's worth something. So
that was your money going in.
That was our money going in.
Okay.
And then we brought in outside money. But when you look at what we raised and what we sold the company for, we raised about 8% of what ended up selling the company for in equity.
What did you sell it for?
An undisclosed sum.
It was, there were lots of different numbers reported.
Signed paperwork.
Somewhere in there. I mean, there were numbers reported anywhere from 150 to 200 million reported. So, so we, once again, $400,000 at the beginning.
Was that accurate reporting or?
Well, it was somewhere.
It's reported.
Somewhere in that range from $1 to a few million. So.
Well, thank you.
But, let's tell you what. Timing's everything, folks. We had a great brand. We had a great product. We have something really good in a bottle. We had a good story, I believe. And we had people like you in this room who appreciate bourbon. And that's really why we're here today, if I really want to drill down. And, timing is everything. We just managed to hit it right at the right spot, the right time, and have something.
Do you all still have a stake in the brand, or do you have a?
They bought the entire company.
Okay.
So we still operate the company every day on a daily basis. We're running the show the same. The nice thing about having a partner like that or an owner like that is we're able to let them mess with the back office stuff. I don't have to worry. Look, I don't have to go into QuickBooks and fool around with accounting now. I don't have to deal with legal. I don't have to deal with labeling. I don't have to deal with all that stuff. We've got a company that handles all that, and we can do what we're good at. That's innovate and continue to make bourbon. I've got Andrew bringing me amazing ideas on a weekly basis of different things he's interested in doing. I've got Kyle doing his thing. So, sometimes it gets to be a pain in the ass with a big company, I can tell you that. But you're kind of swatting flies sometimes, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Well, the nice thing is it is just swatting flies. They don't force anything on us. They let us do what we do very well, for the most part.
Yeah, it's a great arrangement, for real.
You want to elaborate on that, Kyle? Or?
Well, we've heard not horror stories, but we've heard some unfortunate changes that companies have gone through from being acquired.
But big companies are
get
great
out type thing.
They're great at killing small brands. Everybody in this room that's in business understands that. Large companies, number one, cannot create brands, typically. Okay? They're not nimble enough. They're not usually in. Turning a big company is like turning an aircraft carrier. It doesn't happen overnight. We want to be a speedboat, and that's the way we operate the company. So the art is to manage the expectations of the mothership, is what I call it. Okay? Don't let the mothership get too much in the way. Feed them what they need to get, and continue to do what you're good at doing. But the mothership has to be willing to do that.
Yes.
They're not always willing to do that, but in our case, they've been willing to do that. So we're fortunate. We're very fortunate to have that.
I'm going to take it to another side for a moment, in that the bourbon industry is a family, and that we all drink I'm not brand affiliated, but you all still drink other people's stuff. I want to know your favorite bourbons that's not Angel's Envy. Andrew, I'll start with you.
I'm an Old Forester kind of guy.
Yeah? Why is that?
I don't know. It's kind of got an iffy rep. It's getting a little better now that we're.
Oh, who said it had an iffy rep? It's great bourbon.
Yeah, I think it's great bourbon, but there are people out there that, it's kind of mid-shelf, so it's.
I think the problem is the price point. For so long it's so low. It's some of the best bourbon in the world, but people think, well, hell, if it's for $18, it can't be that great. Well, guess what? It is some of the best in the world. And I've been telling Campbell Brown, those guys, Paul Barger for years, raise the price on that sucker. And get what it's worth, and you're starting to see that now,
Yeah.
But that's a great choice.
Old Forester 1920. That's hard to beat.
It's really amazing stuff, man.
It's good.
Yeah, And Brown-Forman, is a very conservative company. They have not really been known, I think, for being very innovative. I think with Woodford and Dad, that was definitely a huge innovation. But I'm seeing now, especially with some of these Old Forester releases and other things like that, I love to see that 100 a year plus of history is really becoming less concerned about protecting what you got and starting to be more of a leader in the industry.
They're coming around. So Wes, what's your favorite bourbon outside of Angel's Envy?
I'm a collector. I'll try any bourbon I can get my hands on. Eagle Rare is one of my favorites.
The regular 10-year-old?
Well, that or the older age statement stuff.
Okay.
Some of the older, the Elijah Craig age statement stuff, the older stuff
Okay.
there. I like supporting craft producers. High West is another one. Now, there's a distillery we helped create up in New York called Catskill Distilling. They've got some crazy stuff that's really good. And they've been experimenting with accelerated maturation that Dad and I set up for them. So, look, folks, I'm an advocate for Angel's Envy first. Then I'm an advocate for bourbon and Kentucky. So, there's so many good products out there. There's so many choices. And I love drinking other folks' stuff. It's funny, I can go into a bar. Fred, you're probably like this too. I can look at a wall of bourbon, and because of how tight our industry is, 95% of every bottle on that wall we have some connection to.
Yeah.
I know that person, I know the master distiller, that person's a family member, that person, whatever, we help this, that, and the other, and it's that interconnected.
Kyle, what's your favorite bourbon other than Angel's Envy?
Four Roses single barrel.
V yeast? V yeast?
Usually, yeah.
Okay.
That's
getting a little.
Yes.
Absolutely, you can tell the difference between the yeast.
Come over to the house, we'll tie them out.
All right.
Sounds like
We have all of the recipes, so. Side by side, yes. Alone, not
We'll
always.
bring Rutledge over and see if he can tell us what.
Oh, yeah, that's a palate now. Yeah, even though he's still got it.
Yep.
He's still got it. So, we still got a little bit of time here, but I want to get to what I think is one of the best releases that you all have had in the past, since you came out. Paul Packholt, picked the 2012 release as the best spirit in the world, but I would put this up against it, the 2014 release. This has always been one of my favorites. Can you tell us a little bit about it? And folks, please enjoy this. You're not going to find this on the market.
This is something that the first year we did it was 2012. And my partners did not want to do it. We felt like it was too early in the life cycle of the brand to do something, a special release. We just launched in 2011. So for those guys, it was like, oh hell, we don't have time to do this. It might dilute our core brand. So I essentially just did it. And I'm glad we did because, like Fred said, Paul Packholt named it the #1 spirit in the world, not just the #1 bourbon, the #1 spirit in the world in 2012. So we do it every year. Andrew and Kyle are largely responsible for the barrel selections that go into it. They're setting aside barrels throughout the year that they think will be good for cask strength.
No, Andrew was not 21 when this came out.
No.
He didn't work for us yet.
Yeah,
Andrew didn't work for us
He didn't
yet.
do it back then.
This one's unique though. So Grandpa passed away in 2013. So this is the first one that you and I did by ourselves.
That's right. Yeah. But Dad, wait a minute, this is 14, right?
This is 14.
This is 14. So Dad passed. All right, so this is what happened with this release. God, it's funny, it's just a few years ago, but I forget. I can't remember what I had for lunch today anyway, so. It's hard for me to talk about this because it gets kind of emotional sometimes. This was the last spirit that Dad tasted before he passed away. So it was symbolic in a way that Dad, and we did it as, Dad was sick. So Kyle and I did it ourselves. And, to get Dad's approval was kind of him saying, guys, you got this. And he passed away in September of 2014. So for Dad to say that and to kind of get that, that final kind of, that final approval was very important to us. And I think it's good.
You know, isn't that what this is all about, though? Mm-hmm. It's about that connection, the family, and you know, it doesn't even have to be, it can be a moment, but that's the whole purpose of bourbon, is to enjoy the moment, right? And, yes, it is. And when we taste this, we're essentially tasting, you know, the connection, the family bond, it brings us to that moment. And this one has always tasted so differently to me, always. I mean, I get like a vermouth note in here that I don't get in any bourbons. So this is, alone from the taste profile, it's gorgeous, but the story makes it better.
You know,
and
that's
genuine.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, bourbon, like we've been drinking spirits as humans for a couple thousand years, you know. And, you know, spirits are designed to enhance our social experiences together. And we get together for special occasions. We get together for birthdays and have a drink. We get to, you know, a hard day at work, we go have a drink, you know, for when somebody passes away, you know, we toast in their honor. So they become a significant part of our social structure and our social interaction. And I really think about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just something that we make to make money, you know, or we to support our families. It's you know, it's got a historical significance, and there is that social aspect of it. I get letters all the time from people, hey, come and sign this bottle for me. This is going to this occasion or for a wedding, or we toasted, you know, I've got some Army folks that said we toasted this for our lost brothers when we came back from deployment. You know, that's pretty impactful to me. Look, we're not curing cancer here, all right? But I think that, you know, we're having fun with this, aren't we, right? This is okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I have one last question for you before I open up to the audience for questions. And that is, what is your future? I'm not saying Angel's Envy future. I'm talking individual. And I'll start with you. What's your future? Are we seeing master distiller?
I don't know. Still trying to figure all that out. Right now I'm distilling, so I've kind of jumped from section to section. So far, I think the blending side's a little more my speed. I think I've liked that a little bit more so far. So more the master blender direction, or, you know, even, I mean, eventually we're going to have to open another distillery, or, you know, we're going to spread our brand out, spread our wings a little bit more, and maybe there's other directions I could take. But
hey.
I mean, I've only been in this industry for a couple of years. I've only done everything for, you know, this is the longest I've been doing anything is I'm distilling now for a year and a half. So I haven't really picked my direction yet, but I'd say the next couple of years I will.
Did any of us know what they wanted to do at 24 years old?
I know, it's fantastic. You know, actually, yes, I did. I knew what I was
I know
do.
you would, Fred.
Yeah, I'm
Wearing ascot.
Yeah, wearing ascots and writing about bourbon. Yeah, I knew that.
I think there's a class for that now.
Yeah. Oh, hey, by the way, what did you major in college, Wes?
Look, I like. The last time I spent in school was learning how to fly airplanes, and that's totally irrelevant to anything we're doing now. But you know, I'm a collector of experiences, Fred. That's what I.
Okay.
That's
all
what
right.
I'm all
So
about.
we still pickles, and we're avoiding the question about what we majored in college. All right.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's it.
But you know, on a more serious note, what is the future for Wes Henderson? You're becoming a celebrity. Katie Couric is following you on Twitter, stalking you on airplanes. You know, you're becoming worldwide known for your love for bourbon. Are you staying with Angel's Envy? Are you going to do something else? You're going to become this ultra TV personality. What can we expect from Wes Henderson?
Fred, flattery will get you everywhere. I can tell you that right now. None of which any of that is true, except for the Katie Couric part, by the way. This is a great business. It really is. It allows me to do things I've never thought I would ever do. It's allowed me to, do things with my family I never thought I would be able to do. Work with my dad, which I never really thought would happen. Meet wonderful people like we're doing here today. That's really the best part of what we do. So as long as I can continue doing those things, then I'll be happy. I am kind of a restless, so as you can tell by my feet moving up here, it's hard for me to sit still. I'm a pretty restless person, but
I am amazed you haven't stood up this entire time.
normally Fred threatened to tie me to the chair because, folks,
Yep.
I don't sit. I am up pacing and talking. But this has been nice, though, because I've been able to relax and we've been able to have a good discussion. So we'll see. I think we've got a lot of unfinished work at Angels Envy. I've got a bunch of files from my dad and a bunch of things we talked about doing. And I think there's some unfinished business here. So I'm going to keep doing, as long as I keep these guys involved, as long as my wife is continuing to be the saintly, patient person she is. Right, honey? So. I'll be good. And really, she's the one behind all this, if you really think about it, folks. Anybody that can put up with me and 6 boys at home every day.
Seriously. Kyle, what's your future?
Wait a minute. I'll tell them what their futures are. They don't really have a choice in this, but go ahead.
Let's see
What would you like, Kyle? What would you like to do?
I'm already running the plant, so.
Yes, you are.
So my grandfather, it took him 20 years for Brown-Forman to name in the master distiller. I've been doing this for almost 8 years this year. So I figure next 15 years, maybe I'll have figured that out, possibly earned that. And
Wow.
I have nowhere else to go.
You want to be a master distiller?
That's what my goal is to,
if you wanted to, you could call your marketing department and they would give you the title right now.
That's a problem.
We talked about this earlier too, Fred. No.
Why not?
It needs to be earned, to be frank. So.
Okay.
No.
Listen, I'm going to Walgreens and getting my plaque. I'm a master distiller right after this, so I'm kidding. But that's good. Glad to hear it. So what do you want to distill? What are your plans for the whiskey? Since I look at you, I love you, Wes, but I look at Kyle as the caretaker for the liquid of the future. Am I right in that?
That's fine with me.
All right.
I've got a house in Florida. I'd love to go there. I'm good. It's all good. Look,
Do you trust the whiskey in his hands?
Oh yeah. These guys have learned from the best, and the best isn't me. It's my grandfather, or my father rather, their grandfather. And and we built that thing from the ground up. We know every nook and cranny and pipe and wire and hose and. The still we intimately know, every time it burps or makes a weird noise, we know what's going on. So, and they're well grounded. That's just as important. They're reasonably smart, not as smart as their father, but they're pretty sharp guys. The future's in good hands.
Well, with that said, I think we have time for questions from the audience now. If anyone has a question, Fred, right here. Very good name, by the way, sir. Hold on, we got a microphone coming.
I have been fortunate enough to visit 179 distilleries around the world, and my wife is going with me. And my wife does not drink whiskey. The reason I wanted to
And she's still your wife, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
the reason I wanted to bring this up is because she had the chance to meet your dad and your granddad, Lincoln. And I'm going to get teary-eyed because at the time he was suffering from cancer, and he took the time to talk with her for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And she told me, if this is the kind of people that run the bourbon industry, I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Lincoln had that incredible quality to make you feel so special when you were talking to him. I remember when I was talking to him, he told me I was his favorite writer, and I knew the way I knew it's like, you've never read a single thing I've written, but I will take it. It made me feel good.
Lies and war stories, Fred. Lies and war stories.
Hi, I'm from Bardstown, Kentucky, and
Where are you? I can't see you. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
grown up there for many years, all my life. And we're seeing a lot of warehouse growth down there. Of course, Lux has come down, and Bardstown Bourbon Company, and there's a whole bunch of growth down there. What do you see as with all the warehouse growth I'm seeing there, and I've lived there a long time, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this growth. What do you see your warehouse needs for the future, and what are your plans kind of for that? And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. That's always the million-dollar question, or in our case, the multi-million-dollar question, is predicting the future. Anybody that tells you today that they could predict where bourbon is today, they're crazy. Nobody saw this coming. And we're actively pursuing sites to build more warehouses pretty much as we speak. And the trick is, though, real estate in Kentucky and Louisville is so expensive. There's really not a lot of places to put them. So you've got the black fungus issue, so you can't be too close to residential areas. So we're looking out in surrounding counties, Nelson, Trimble, Henry, Oldham, so on and so forth. So you can make all the bourbon you want, but you got to store it. I can only put so much in my basement, and then you got to find a place to put it. So that's the challenge in the industry now, by the way, is finding storage.
Everyone's running out of room.
Everyone's running out of room. There's some companies that are building warehouses to lease back to distillers in front of the house. All that's
Slugger Field, maybe you could lease some space on the field there when they're not playing.
We do not store our product downtown. We have a warehouse out in Shively that holds about 18,000 barrels. We contract to other distilleries to store barrels there, but we don't store barrels at our location on Main Street. It's just it's too dangerous. The mayor frowns upon explosions in the middle of downtown. It's not good for business.
It isn't.
No.
For anybody.
Unless it's the sewers blowing up, then it's okay.
Yeah. Most of the downtown fires in this country were actually really started by distilleries. So that's what led to fire insurance back in the 1800s was their distillery fires. But that's getting far too much into history for folks. We have a question right over here.
I have an important girls question. Who chose the shape of your bottle?
It was a team effort, when we decided to do the name Angel's Envy, we started out looking at, we keyed in on the Angel's Share. You guys know this because you're fans of bourbon. So the Angel's Share is what evaporates out of barrels as it sits in a warehouse. And we really thought that was really cool. Well, and we would have named it, we probably would have named the brand Angel's Share if there wasn't an Australian wine that is trademarked Angel's Share. So, but guess what? I'm really glad we didn't, because we came up with Angel's Envy. So when you think of angels, what's the first thing you think when you think of angels? Wings. So the wings have that shape. I wanted to put the wings on the back of the bottle so you could see them, through the spirits. So then the bottle just took that same kind of organic shape, and I like the fact that we may have a little femininity to it. I thought that was kind of cool. Because we knew more. It wasn't an overt thought, though. It wasn't we're thinking, well, more women are drinking bourbon, we need to make it look feminine. It just happened to work out that way. And it is a sexy bottle.
Yeah, it's a good-looking bottle.
That's okay. But guess what? It's not too sexy that the dudes were not afraid to pick it up and take it to the counter. There's that balance there, right, guys? All right, when you understand what I'm talking about. So
it also takes up much more real estate on the shelf than other bottles, which is very convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't think about that kind of stuff, Brett. Come on.
Do we have any other questions? We have one right over here. And Zoe, you keep us informed on our time.
Do you think there'll be room for another generation in the business?
Ask Kyle that one.
He's trying already. We have our granddaughter, Maddie, and we have our grandson, Liam. So, we're, the Hendersons continue to procreate, which obviously with all these boys. Fortunately, we've got Michelle here, Kyle's wife, who's been tremendously supportive of Kyle and working, probably 70 hours a week. So who knows? Hopefully the next generation will find as much interest in it as we do. Should have brought the babies tonight, honey.
Nah, no.
No? Michelle's like, hell no. She's like, Friday night out, no way.
If you have anything left, I would like you to pick it up, and I'd like to toast the Hendersons. Thank you so much. What you have done for bourbon tonight is about you and what your family has done and what it will continue to do. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Cheers.
Cheers, Fred.
If you love Eagle Rare Bourbon, then go support the causes they stand for at eaglerarelife.com. You can read hundreds of stories, just like the ones you heard today. So go and vote for the 2019 nominees that inspire you the most. Hurry, because voting ends on December 5th.